Hi, Cheri. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
I am so thrilled to be here and to be able to talk with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you know what? It's just wild how God works because I did a podcast episode with Lynn and Michelle just recently, and I made a reel out of a clip, and the clip happened to be where Lynn mentioned your name, and we posted it, and she tagged you in it, and then you commented, and we just got talking, and I just love how God connects His believers because you have a really powerful story, and you've made a product to help others in grief, and so I can't wait to highlight that today. But before we get there, I wanted to share a little bit about that story of you and I connecting. So
Yeah.
I reached out to you. You had mentioned you were a grieving mom, and I was going to connect you to a friend of mine. And we just got talking on the phone, and you talked about how that story of just her tagging you just really helped you in the middle of a hard week in grief. And you call them emotional ambushes, which is such a beautiful way to talk about grief because there's times where these waves of grief hit you and it's like an emotional ambush. I think it's just a beautiful way. So tell me how that being tagged in that story and the words in the story, you can tell a little bit about what
Yeah.
Lynn shared helped you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone listening that is grieving, has lost a loved one, knows what an emotional ambush is. It comes out of nowhere. Um, for me, particularly, it's really weird being in a store. I just am not, I don't want to be in a store. That seems to be, especially grocery stores, that seems to be when all of a sudden an emotion will just hit you. And it's almost kind of like I just have to get out of the store. I hear a song, I see a product, I smell a perfume, I see someone that looks like my daughter, and I just have to get out, or that wave of that emotion hits.
Yes.
Um, yeah, or you can just be at home and it just all of a sudden this wave and you just start crying. You don't have any control over this.
Right.
And so every day is hard, but it was a bad day, and so I got a notification on my phone that said you've been tagged. I'm like, that's weird. Like when would Lynn Cowell tag me? So I looked it up,
It's
and
awesome.
Lynn and I are friends through podcasting because I used to have a podcast and I've had her on it. But when I had her on it, I shared a phrase that I've never cared for, even before I lost my daughter. I have never cared for someone telling me to hang in there. And
Mm.
it's a phrase that we tell people kind of thinking it's a comforting phrase, like, okay, you just hang in there. And I've always thought, how is that comforting? Like you're telling me to just hang. Like it's up to me I have to use my strength, and pretty soon we know I'm just gonna fall. So that's really not
Right.
encouraging. And as a Christian, I thought, God never leaves me to hang in there. He's never left me. In fact, there are so many verses in the Bible that tell me I'm held. And the one I like for myself is Isaiah, oh, now I'm on the spot, 41, 10 and 13, where it says, I am holding you with my righteous right hand. Do not be discouraged. Do not fear. And when I shared that with Lynn, she shared hers, which was Psalms 139, which is the one she was talking with you about. And she said, love that concept that God is holding us in there. I'm not hanging in there. I am held in there. And that was the one she was talking to you about when she tagged me. And it was just another reminder. God was just reminding me, He's like, hey, I see you. You are not alone. I'm holding you in there. Don't forget. And actually, upon listening to that, I started, rereading and looking more into Psalm 139. And I just loved that concept of being hemmed in there, how God is just surrounding me. And it just really gave me comfort that day.
Yeah. Oh no, I remember the conversation because there was another version of the Bible verse that said, "You encircle me." So it's like you hem me in, you encircle me, and she talked about you and how you had shared how that hang in there and just know we want to be held, right? That's not how it really is. The Lord is holding us and lifting us up, and so it was just wild because I at the time was like, "Oh, who did she tag?" And then I realized, "Oh yeah, she's tagging the lady that we talked about in the quote," and then it was just crazy how your response to that then had me reach out to you. And I thought my sole purpose was to help connect you to Angie, because Angie's a friend of mine who also lost a child, her son, and she has a ministry to help other grieving moms. She's written a book. She wrote a solo episode on her story. Then she did another collaborative book called Mothers Like Me, where other people shared about their losses. I've written about my miscarriage in that book. And so I'm like, I need to connect Cheri to Angie. So I reached out to you, having no idea that you have produced this amazing product called Beyond Grief Communication Cards. And it says, I don't know what to say, which we're going to get into this. But I just sat there and I'm like, oh, this is like a divine appointment where I need to get to know Cheri. So I reached out to you and you shared your story with me. And I thought, can you please be on the podcast and share this beautiful resource to help people when they don't know what to say in grief. But I thought before we get to that, let me hear
Yeah.
more and have you share about your loss. Because I know Annie was your daughter and you shared a little with me on the phone, but I want my listeners to hear a little bit of your backstory. And if you could kind of just share what birthed the product of this, the
Yeah,
story behind it.
absolutely. Well, I love talking about Annie. She was my firstborn and my only daughter. I have three children, and she was a singer-songwriter in Nashville. And on August 11 of 2023, she called me and said that she was coughing up some blood. And prior to
Mm,
that, she had had some trouble breathing. And at age 29, going to a doctor on a regular is just not a priority. They don't, you're 29, getting, physicals on a regular and that they're kind of like, oh, when I don't feel good, I'll go deal with it.
right.
But we had seen each other in July and she had had some trouble breathing and I had said, hey, you need to go have this checked. So she had called me after that time and said, okay, I have an appointment, Mom, to see a pulmonologist and a doctor and I'm going to get this going. I said, great. But before she had that chance, she called and said, this is weird. So I have a friend who's a doctor and I called and said, hey, or I texted him a picture and I said, Annie just sent me this picture uh, of what she coughed up. And he said, she needs to get to Vanderbilt ER now.
Wow.
So I'm about 2.5 hours from there, and I got in the car and went and met her there. Being 29, she went in by herself. I sat in the waiting room, but the doctor texted me and said, "Don't they better not discharge her. I want, they better." And he's a Vanderbilt grad, and he said, "If they discharge her, let me know." Well, they tried, and he said, "I want you to go to Walgreens, whatever's right there, get an oximeter, put it on her finger, march her back in there, and it's time they met Cheri Fletcher."
Wow.
So
I
it
love
took
that.
a while of me basically saying on the discharge papers, it said, please call 911 if oxygen gets below 90. And they discharged her with an oxygen of 89. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I said, we can sit here and I will call 911 from this room or you can admit her. My daughter was not happy with me at all for controlling and being, I'm a 29-year-old woman, mom. And I was like, well, this is what's happening. So we got her admitted on a Friday, and her oxygen kept dropping, kept dropping. By Tuesday, she was in intensive care on ECMO, which is a very big intensive life support system in Vanderbilt.
Wow.
They thought she had pulmonary hypertension, but with oxygen levels that low, they can't do any of the testing that they needed to do to make sure that's what she had, because if they intubated her, she would die. So they assumed she had pulmonary hypertension, right heart failure, and there are 5 ways to treat that. And each take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to see if that's the correct treatment plan. So they started one and 24 hours it didn't work. Let's start the next one, 24, 48 hours it didn't
Mm,
work. So we did that for a week. And finally they decided we better do a lung transplant. And when they did a full body scan, they found a tumor on her ovaries.
wow.
And that was on the 22nd. And they told us that they would need to biopsy that. So on Wednesday, the 20, no, sorry, that was the 21st. On Wednesday, the 22nd, they did a biopsy, but she passed away on the 24th. And we got the
Mm,
biopsy back, and it was actually colorectal cancer that had spread to her ovaries, gotten to her lungs, or gotten into the blood and filled her lungs. No one
Wow.
would have looked for colorectal cancer. It was a very, very aggressive form that they told us, even if they had found it about a year prior when they think it might have started, they would have told us there was no treatment. It was a very aggressive form. So we had about, from the time she called me and went into the ER, we lost her within 12 days. So,
Wow, that is so fast. That is
mm,
so hard. Wow, I just think about like that's less than 2 weeks. I mean, literally from
mhm,
less than 2 weeks from when she entered into the hospital. And they were going to discharge her. Like, it's just unheard of. I mean,
mhm,
I'm glad that you did the mama bear and just
mm,
said, listen, she needs treatment. She needs help because you know what? It was serious. And I'm glad you had a doctor friend that could advise you and say, don't let them discharge her. This is more serious than what, I just think that God
yeah,
provided some details and beautiful blessings too.
absolutely.
And so you knew to go in and
Absolutely.
say, no, she's not leaving this hospital. But
Yeah.
you know what? I think losing a child is so challenging. I can't even imagine the grief. And so I want us to kind of talk about that and have us enter into it because this is where people struggle.
Hmm.
Like, now what do we do? They come in and say,
Yeah.
like, I don't know how to come in and help you. Um, this is a hard loss, and people kind of
Mhm.
sometimes will stay clear of it because they think I don't want to mess up and say the wrong thing. But the staying clear of it's actually more hurtful than if they were to enter in and just try, right? And so
Absolutely.
that's kind of
Absolutely.
what birthed this product, I would think, is
Hmm. Yep.
people say, I don't know what to say.
Yep.
I've said it. Now that I've walked through so much loss in my life, I actually can enter into it more and have that empathy. But for many years, I didn't know what to say, until I've walked through maybe my first or second loss. And so there's so many out there that think, I want to help. I want to be there to support my friend that's just lost their daughter, or my friend that's just lost their son, or whatever, their father, their mother. There's so
Hmm.
much loss out there, but I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. So tell me about how these cards were birthed. Like, what was were there a lot of people struggling how to enter in, or tell me a little bit about
Oh,
how, because
yeah.
this product is amazing. I can't wait to share some of my favorites, and I think it's needed. I think people need help in this area. So how did this come to be?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as a writer, I kept and still keep cards that actually have beautiful messages handwritten in them. And if someone takes the time to write a story that they love about Annie or write a message to me, I keep the card.
Yes.
And I also screenshot texts that people send that are really meaningful and helpful. And one of the things that was really helpful were people that actually asked me questions. Because who doesn't love to be asked questions about their children? And
Yes.
what started this was I had a friend that called me one day and she's never met Annie. And she said, "Oh my word, I just finished taking my firstborn on their first drive. They're getting their permit." She's like, "That was the most terrifying thing ever. What was it like to teach Annie to drive?" And I just started
Wow.
laughing. And I thought that is awesome to remember that my daughter was a terrible driver. And one of the first times we went driving, she turned into oncoming traffic and we were both just screaming. And it was just something I hadn't remembered. And yet her question brought that story to life, and that she cared enough to
Mm.
even call me and think, I wonder what it was like for Cheri to teach Annie. I want to get to know that. And I wrote that question down in a Word doc. And then pretty soon I started writing down other questions that people asked me. And I thought these are very, very caring questions that people are asking
Yeah.
me. And I started paying attention to questions people asked me, and also started writing down questions I wished people would ask me. And we were getting ready for our 1 year anniversary. I call them anniversary.
Oh, I love that.
And we wanted to take our boys and their wives somewhere that we'd never been before to create a new memory. Now, my youngest son Carson got married the year, right, 1 year almost to the day before Annie died. And
Wow.
my middle son got married 3 months after Annie died.
Oh, wow.
So they're newlyweds, and I wanted to be I wanted to make sure their wives weren't uncomfortable. This is to be a newlywed, a new bride in a home is kind of scary anyway, but then to be a new bride in a home where the big sister has passed away, that is really, really big. So I
Right.
thought I want to make this a special time. I don't want it to be a depressing, over because Annie was a silly, silly person. She loved sunflowers, as what's on that box. So she was a sunflower. She was she loved to dance. If it was uncomfortable, she was going to start a kitchen dance. If there was tension, she was going to be silly. So I knew she wouldn't want this time to be an oppressive time.
Right.
And as a writer, and I love curriculum, I knew if I said to my boys, which I did say, hey, we're going to take some time to just reflect over the past year without Annie. I know in their mind, they're thinking, oh, mom's going to write a lesson plan.
It's going to be a science lesson or a
Yeah.
math
Yeah.
lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't, didn't want to have a book. There's not a book on just kind of, I didn't want that kind of a setting. And my boys love card games. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to take these cards and I'm going to take these questions and put them on index cards, and we're just going to go through these cards. And I kind of looked online for maybe some that might have been made up already, and there weren't any because
Mm.
this is a topic people don't want to sit around and have a discussion about. So I just went to Staples and printed whatever questions I had on these index cards, and I sat them on the table at the Airbnb that we were at, and we could answer them as we wanted to. And I also saw my boys sometimes just sitting with a card alone and reflecting on the
Oh,
question.
I love that.
And it just kind of broke that tension. And, but yet it was, we answered them differently because I'll answer the question different than they will. And it also gave their brides a chance to get to know Annie in a different way,
Yes.
and not feel pressured to answer if they didn't want to. And it was just kind of an easy thing. And my boys loved it. And then I was talking about it, and other people were like, well, I would love those cards. How can I get those cards? I'm like, well, they're just my index cards. And that's kind of how it got started.
Mm. I love that it was a time where you were trying to create something special with your kids. And I have two boys. And so I get it. They're not going to want to have it like be like, let's sit
No.
down and, but like a card game is a really beautiful way. Like we played so many board games around the family table, and card games. And so I love that that's what you created. And my favorite part is that they took some of them and sat with them alone too, because I think reflection's important in grief, reflecting and thinking of the memories and letting yourself sit in it, right? I think so many times we want to try to go as fast as we can through it or around it, even. I
Mhm.
would say most people try to not even go through it, they just want to avoid it. And so this is a chance to just sit in it, but sit in it together and reminisce. And it's a happy time because you're sharing special things about your daughter. It's not all like I'm feeling necessarily about how you're feeling. It's more about the memories and bringing to light the joyful things you remember, like the driving, learning, teaching your child to drive. I love that that was the first one, and that friend reached out because I do think sometimes we don't know what to say, and so it's nice to like. We're coming up to the 1 year anniversary of my dad's passing in a couple months, and I've been thinking about it a lot. Like we're getting close to when the day he entered the hospital, and
Mhm.
I know it's different than a child, but just even the grief cards, like I'm like, oh, I'm going to start going through these and maybe sit with my husband and do it. Or when my kids come home, go, hey, pick a card. Let's talk about grandpa.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so good because it's important. One of my favorite memories this last holiday, because my first holiday without my dad in December. And in January, we always took a New Year's trip to bring in the new year in Palm Springs. And so my sister had got these ornaments. They didn't come in time for Christmas. She was really bummed, but they actually came on this trip we were at, and we're all standing
Mhm.
around the pool, and my dad loved to like lay in this chair by the pool. So it was just this beautiful time of talking, and I just think it's therapeutic as a group to talk about
Yeah.
the one that's lost. And so this is like a way to have that not be awkward, or not, maybe some people don't know how to do that. And so these
Yeah.
cards are brilliant because they give words to that you can't sometimes put into your own words. And so I want to know what some of your favorites are, but I'm going to read a couple of mine. But what I love on the thing is you have, it says beyond, right? And it says, I don't know what to say. But then you have this quote. Wait, let me find the card with the quote. Oh, here it is. So it says right here in bold. Let me read this. Grief is complicated, but communicating doesn't have to be. So, like the communicating about the grief doesn't have to be. And so I love that you made this way where we can grieve
Mhm.
and talk about it and not have it be complicated, you know?
Yeah, for
It
sure.
really, yeah. And it, I just think the story behind how they came to be too is such a tender moment with your sons. And then others are like, wait, I want these cards. And, I've told a couple people about them too. They're like, this is a brilliant idea because, or even like now I'm thinking about even a friend at school that lost a loved one. I'm like, you know what? You have this card. Let me tell this one. Instead of asking, how are you? Which let's keep it real. We always, how are you? And we
Yep.
kind of, how are you? My one friend's like, I hate the head thing. If I get another head bob
Yes.
of how are you, I'm going to lose my mind. And then instead ask, what has this week been like for you? Which is a better, deeper question, right? Like, has it been a lot of grief this week or has it been a better week? Have you had the emotional ambushes? Have you not? Like, enter into it versus just the general, how are you? Which, let's
We're
keep it
just going
real.
to say okay because
Yeah.
it's so general. We don't even know how to answer that.
Yeah. So I think this one right here is gold. Now, tell me, do you have a favorite or did one of your kids, like, I'm sure you wrote them all, so they're
Yeah.
all meaningful to you, but I hate to put you on a spot, but like,
No, no,
was
no.
there a card that you really helped foster a lot of conversation?
Well, one of the ones that was kind of funny was, is there an inside joke or a secret that's okay that you can share now? And
Mm,
um, and so everyone's going to answer it differently. So you're going to learn something new about that person as each person answers it differently.
yes.
And so,
And that might even be fun to learn some stuff you never
yeah,
knew.
yeah, and we say that it's okay to share. I mean, there's some things that I think need to stay private, but
Right.
I shared that I always wanted my kids to at least turn on their Find Friends while they traveled. So if you're gonna be like going from point A to point B, could you just turn it on while you're traveling from point A to point B so that if you don't make it to point B, like we can find what ditch you're in. And
That's horrible, but I get it. No, I get what
I
you're saying. I
know,
know it's a good thing because as adults, they don't want you to have
yeah,
access to their
no,
find their
no,
friends. Yes,
no,
yes.
and I get it, right? But especially when they're single. My boys are married now, so that's just off the table. But when they were single. And one, I said, okay, I'll share this. The last year of Annie's life, she forgot to turn her Find Friends off. And I never
Oh,
told her.
off.
Yeah.
So you
I
could
said,
see where she was.
I could see where she was for the entire last year of her life, which I think was a gift from God.
It
Um,
was.
and I said, and they're like, you didn't tell her? I'm like, of course not. And like, Mom. And I'm like, I'm telling you, this is a secret that I'm sharing now. And everyone kind of got a laugh about that. And they're like, Annie would be so furious. And I'm like, I know, but just little
I
funny
love that.
things. Yeah,
Yeah, that's really sweet. And you know what? I see my kids are like young enough that I still have them on Find the Friend app because one's in college
hmm,
and one just graduated. But I do see
absolutely.
like they're eventually going to be like, we're going to turn that off, Mom. We
Well,
don't want
yeah.
you knowing.
And my boys are
And that's
married, so
natural,
needs to
right?
come
So that's the
off.
natural.
Yes.
Yes. But I love that. And I love that you had an extra year of just having a little more in knowing of what's
Hmm.
going on in your daughter's life as she is now. She was 28, 29, right? When that year that
Hmm.
happened. So that's so fun. What was the one? Do you know the card that your son maybe was taken off to himself and talked, or was there, do you
No,
remember? Or
yeah, I
no, no.
don't.
It's just beautiful.
Mm-mm.
I think the reflection on it. So I'll share a couple more that I really liked. So
Yeah,
if you could do one thing over again with them, what would it be? Now, I have to say, I almost got a little emotional reading some
I
of these because
know.
I'm like, okay, I would go. My dad and I love to walk around the lake, the RSM lake, and he had a much slower pace than I did. So it wasn't really exercise for me, but it was beautiful time to talk with my dad. And my mom
Hmm.
has dementia. So it was good for him to have some conversation with someone that could, have a little more depth to it. And so we love that. And then the other thing I loved is just he came over for game nights with my kids. They're not in the house anymore, but when they were still living here and my mom would come too, but sometimes it got to a point where my mom couldn't. So just my dad would come. And my last memory of my dad in my home, we played Hearts, which was his favorite game, which we hated playing with him because he always shot the moon and we could not figure it out. But my son was with me and he shot the moon and beat
Oh,
grandpa. And it was like this moment where my dad was so proud for him. And that was the last time he ever sat in my house at my kitchen table. So, like, to me, that
mhm.
card really like touched
Yeah,
me. And so I want to talk about my kids with this and say, what would you say? And so I love the conversation it fosters, Cheri, and I love that it's got depth to it. I mean, my podcast name is Depth, and I want us
yeah,
to have deep rooted growth in the Lord, but it's also depth in our conversations with others and depth in our relationships. And I think this grief can sometimes, some people don't know how to enter in, and so it can cause a wall to go up,
right.
or
Absolutely.
maybe or we don't
Yes.
want to share something, but I think just being gracious and saying, "Hey, I have a question, some cards. Would this be helpful?" And asking, because I do think that it's helpful to talk about our loved ones. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And it's scary. I think it's scarier to enter into the pain of child loss than others because it is.
Yes.
It's a terrifying situation, I think, to others, and they don't know how to enter it because they are, and it's from a caring heart. That's what I tell grievers. We are terrifying people, those of us that have lost a child. So
Mm,
we need to be gracious of maybe someone that's scared to enter our pain. So sometimes it's you can tell if someone's uncomfortable. So I ask them questions. Tell me, hey, how's your daughter doing today? What is she up to? Oh, yeah, Annie would have loved that. And it breaks that tension. It addresses the elephant in the room. It lets them know I'm okay to discuss my daughter, but I ask them questions too about what their children are into. What are your children doing? Oh, my boys would love that. Yeah, my boys did that too. And Annie would have loved that. Annie loved that, and then I bring Annie in and that lets that person know it's okay to approach me. Because
yes.
as a griever, it can be easy to be offended and get bitter. And I just think that's what the enemy wants. He wants us to isolate and separate and be divided and that wall to go up, which makes healing, that much harder. And it can be easy to be bitter because people do say kind of dumb things,
Yes.
but you have to, I really think, I really believe that for the most part, people don't mean to. They don't mean to. It's not intentional. And so just try to see their heart and realize that it took a lot of guts for them to even approach you. So even if they did
Yes.
say something kind of dumb, you as the grieving person, you have the opportunity to turn that around graciously. And you can let people know I love talking about all three of my children, all three of them, Annie
Yes.
and my boys. Who doesn't love talking about their child? And it's okay.
Yes.
I'm proud of my daughter. And, she had her master's in social work. She worked her tail off to get her master's. And while she worked in a nursing home with that, she worked hard to get her degree or her business license. She didn't want to tell us that she got her business license to be self-employed on the Monday after she passed. So she
Oh,
she was self-employed. She was a photographer and a singer-songwriter, and she had quit her job as a social worker and was going to be self-employed starting the Monday after she passed. So she did it,
mm,
and
she did.
she
So
did
much to
it.
be proud of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, I love sharing that. I love sharing her music. And so what mother doesn't love that? I saw a post one time. I'm going to look it up so I say it right. It says, "You take new pictures. I repost the only ones I have."
Oh, that's so
And
powerful.
yeah, and so, there's never going to be a time ever that I want to stop remembering Annie or any of my children. It's not going to be a time when someone says, "Isn't she, she needs to let that go." I'm sorry. That's not going to happen.
No.
Mm-mm.
No, that's not how it, I mean, we don't do that with any of our loved ones, right? We remember all
No.
the special days, the birthdays, all of that. Yeah. I love that. It's funny. So, it's not funny. That's not the right word, but it's interesting. So Kay Warren, she lost her son. I think it was her middle son. Or no, it's her youngest son. I don't know if you know her story, but sadly she lost him to suicide. But she shared once, and this really made an impact on me when I was sending out Christmas cards. And now I do them electronically. I don't send hand, but she said when people would write a handwritten note with it,
Mhm.
it made such a difference because here you are sending your family everything, and everyone sends their Christmas card. And everyone looks perfect in it. Again, no one sees what happens right before they snap that picture of everyone arguing, smile, smile, and then right. But you get this card, and
Yeah.
when you're grieving, she said it's really hard to get these cards in the mail. And
Yeah.
she said the ones that meant the most to her were ones that had a handwritten note attached to them that said
Yep.
something to the fact of like, I know that this is a hard time of year for you, um, something to the fact of acknowledging that. She said, just
Yeah.
acknowledging it. And then, but I just thought I wanted to still share with you my family or, but there was an
Yeah.
acknowledgement of this is hard time of year. The holidays bring up grief in a hard way. And so
Mhm.
just acknowledge it. And she said she couldn't even read them all before the holidays. So after in January, but she said the ones that wrote that note meant so much. And so I remember she saying that. And I was thinking, anyone going through grief, obviously child loss is so hard. Like it's great. Again, we never want to
Mhm.
like classify grief, but it's just one of those, it's like, no, that's so hard. So I definitely think for those, but I even was sending it to others that had just any loss or grief in their life, just a little
Mhm.
handwritten note letting them know I was thinking of them this holidays, or I'm sure the holidays are hard. Let me know how I can pray specifically for you, or just something that would help when these people
Yeah.
are getting cards that are like, my life's perfect, which is not, but this is what you think when you open them,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
Does,
yeah.
did someone
No,
do,
yeah.
tell me, I know that you probably had times where someone entered in a beautiful way or said something really
Oh
heartfelt
yeah.
that was helpful. I'd love for you to share that so we can get examples of what we
Yeah.
can do. And then maybe what to avoid, like what not to do that maybe was hurtful. They didn't mean to, but in your heart, that
Right.
was hard. Can you
Yeah.
share some of those?
Absolutely. There's something that I've learned about, and I don't know if who you were mentioning has any relation to Dr. Lee Warren, but he is a neurologist that also lost his child as well, and he does a lot of writing about the effects of grief on our brain and on our
Mm.
neurologically in our body, and talking about what's called grief brain fog.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and as a writer and having had a podcast that was going on prior to Annie passing, um, I read a lot. As you know, you read a lot so that when you interview people, you know what's going on.
Yes.
I still can't read real, sit down and just read. It takes a lot for me to sit down and read because I'll read something and go, what did I just read? And so the first several months, almost the first year, even reading the Bible, I'd be like, I don't even know what I just read. I don't know if I even
Mm.
want to open the Bible. And I still have two friends that on their own, without me saying anything, one texts me every day, whatever Bible verse she read for the day, and she doesn't expect a reply. That's another thing. Please give the griever the grace of not expecting a reply.
Ooh, that's really good right there.
Yes.
Yes.
So she every day she texts me to this day. It's almost 2.5 years coming up here pretty soon. She'll text me the Bible verse that she read for the day, and at the end she'll just send the verse, and then she'll put held at the bottom. Every day I
Oh, I
get that
love
Bible verse text.
that.
So I know it's like if today is a day that I'm in a place where I just don't even look at a book or the Bible, I'm going to get a text from her. I'm going to get a Bible text. And then I have a friend who sends a prayer every Monday, a specific prayer naming each member in my family and praying something over each member. And just knowing that was God telling me, you don't have to do this right now, Cheri. I got you. I got you covered.
Mm.
I'm sending prayer warriors. I'm going to read, I'm going to have scripture said to you. And I just knew God understood that I don't have to sit down and dig into his word right now because I don't have it in me. And it just getting those texts and those prayers and those Bible verses sent to me. And they weren't sent, they all it was a prayer or a Bible verse, and it wasn't sent in the mind frame of here, this will fix you, or with a cliche of
Right.
God's got a plan, because God's got a plan and God's got a will. Don't say those things. We know that, but those aren't those just don't help. And so just sending a Bible text and you're held today, or Annie's, favorite flower was a sunflower. And I still have people when they're out and about, if they see a sunflower, they'll feel like, hey, I'm driving somewhere and I saw the sunflower and here's a picture of it and I'm thinking of you. Love that.
Mm.
That's
Love that too.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love the examples you gave, and I love the verse and then the held, like at the end,
Mhm.
just reminding you you're being held. Like it's powerful, right? And even if that's the only thing that you were had the time to do for the time in the word, right? Is that verse, and
Mhm.
remind yourself that God's holding you. Like that is because sometimes you're right, that brain fog, it's very real. And sometimes the grief is so hard too that, like you said, those days you just want to crawl back into bed and stay in the bed, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You got to do what you need to do to get
Yeah.
through it. But I love the verse of the day and the prayer. I think those are really powerful. And thank you for sharing. Don't say God has a plan. I think sometimes these little cliches fall short when
Yeah.
you're in the middle of grief. Now, years down the road, sometimes these things can be maybe better, but like never at the beginning, right? Like
Yeah.
at the beginning, it's like we just want to remind you to lament and just trust, like lean into the Lord and say, Lord, I don't know why this is on my, like this happened to me, but I'm taking my broken pieces to you, like David
Yes.
did in the Psalms, and I'm giving you my frustrations and my whys and my
Yes.
doubts and I'm
Well,
just laying
God
it at
gets
your
it.
feet.
He gets it. God willingly lost his child so I can have mine
Yes.
back. He willingly,
Mm,
he gets it. And his wrath is on the enemy. He hates the enemy and he hates sin. So I turn my wrath on the enemy too. And that, as someone that loves justice, that just gives me some kind of comfort to
yes.
get mad at the right source.
I think that's good. Yeah. Well, we could talk all day because I think the tools you're giving are so helpful. But this is something I just thought was so beautiful because your podcast, um, well, let me say it this way. You have a quote on your business card. So you have something that says, now
Mhm.
what? And this is what you say. You're helping women navigate life's unexpected transitions with faith, comfort, and purpose because while your roles may change, your purpose is eternal. And that's a
Mhm.
powerful quote because I think when we go through loss and the role that we had is gone, we think, well, now what? Now what?
Mhm.
Now what are we supposed to do? So I love that you said the may have changed, but your purpose, this purpose that the Lord created for it, is eternal.
Mhm.
Can you tell more about that? I just think it's so powerful. And how did you walk that through when you lost your
Yeah.
daughter?
Well, that was my ministry before I lost Annie. And that was my podcast. Your roles in life will change, but your purpose is eternal. And a lot of times I would hear women say, I've got to find myself. And I would ask them, okay, what role did you just lose? Because we get so much validation, and we feel so relevant when we're in an active role that is telling us that we're doing a good job and that people appreciate us and we're getting thanked and we're using the calling that God put in us in that role. It feels great. But our roles in life end, they have seasons. And so when that role ends, whether it's taken from us, we get fired or replaced, or it just has a season. If you're on a PTO leader or a chair board and that role ends, and all of a sudden you feel like, wow, I'm not needed anymore. I remember one time in our church, they decided the board decided to take this really, really old organ out. And the organist was just beside herself, even though she was an
Oh,
amazing pianist. That organ was her identity.
yes.
And and she just felt worthless, like they were just throwing her in the trash. And I just remember one time saying that, but your role ended, but your purpose is eternal. God created us to glorify Him. He created us in His image to reflect Him to the world. That's our purpose. And how we do it is our calling. And you're going to take that calling into every single role you have. And when one role ends, God's going to say, thank you. You had an eternal impact. That you had a purpose that is eternal in that role. And now I'm going to either give you a waiting period and you'll get ready for the next role, or I have another role ready for you because I made you. Ephesians 2:10 says you're a masterpiece and I planned these good works for you long ago. God doesn't make a masterpiece and then tell the masterpiece to go find itself, right? It's an intentional creation that he knows. I know exactly where this masterpiece is going to be used. And if someone doesn't need it here, we'll use it over here. But the purpose is to reflect the creator. And, now my active role as Annie's mother has ended.
Mm,
But the impact that I had in her life is an eternal, its purpose was eternal. And God used me in her life for an eternal purpose. And so, even though that doesn't take the pain away, I find comfort in that, knowing that my role has ended, but my purpose is eternal.
That's so good. You know, it's interesting. I just launched my last child, and I have a lot of people that say, what do you do when you're an empty nester? I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself. Like, I keep thinking, in a year, I'm going to have, my son's going to graduate high school or my daughter, and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And it's like, it is a huge change. I will admit that. Like,
Hmm.
it's a huge loss
Yeah.
in the sense that you're not having kids living in your home anymore, but you're always a mom. But yes, it
Hmm.
was hard for me. But I also think, like you said, that role may change, but what has God created me to do? What is my purpose? And I'm thankful I have this ministry that it's been before the kids left the home, right? So I could keep doing it. But for people that don't, it's kind of this like, I don't know how, like you said, they have to find themselves. They don't know what to do. So I think after grief, that also feels that way. Now what? I remember even when
Now
I
what?
went through my divorce, it was like, I've lost this big role of, having a
Hmm.
marriage and having being a wife. And now what do so I just think it happens in a lot of them. And I can only imagine it's even more intense when a child
Hmm.
passes, that, okay, now that's like finite, I mean, it's not final. It's not, just like they're off to college, right? It's just very different.
Yeah.
So I'm not comparing it, but I'm just saying roles
Right.
change in so many ways, but what do you do? So I love that. And I love that, you know, we have to sit there and ask the Lord. I mean, we can ask the Lord, what is our purpose? What have you created me to be? And um find our
It's yeah,
our calling.
glorify me right where right where you are today. The purpose and your purpose is to manifest God, to show God to somebody. And so, what is my purpose today? My purpose is talking to you right now and spreading this message. And then later this afternoon, my purpose might be in a grocery store line. It's my
Yes.
purpose. We live in this world that says you've got to go viral. And that
Yes,
itself is a
yes.
virus, right? And if we aren't,
So
if
true.
we, yeah, if we don't have 100,000 followers, but Jesus is like, no, it's for the least of these. If you have one person that you have shown that my heart, my character to, that's your purpose.
Yes.
And I don't need you to be viral, and I don't need 100,000 followers for you to matter and for you to have the purpose I placed for you long ago in Ephesians 2:10. That's just, I love that verse. You're a masterpiece.
Yes.
You're a masterpiece, not a replica. You are an original. And in the Bible, in the Greek, it's a poeme. It says you are a poeme, and that's the only time it's used in the Bible, that word. So it's like you're
Mm,
this living poem. You are this living, breathing poeme of God. And it's not, you are not an accident. You are so intentional. And so, you know, I just want women to grasp that concept. So when they're like, now what? God's like, oh, you have no idea how I can use
I
you.
know. It's powerful. And I love that you said it's not this huge, I think we have to have this huge impact, but it's like that one person that you speak to and
Hmm.
encourage. That's your purpose that day. And
Hmm.
I'll start my morning, God, who do I need to minister to today? Or who do you have me? And I love that you, Cheri, that beautiful Friday where you were that a divine appointment.
Yes, it
Sometimes we
was
don't
so
even
good.
know the person that God's saying, this is who you're going to have an impact on today, or you're going to connect with. And so just being ready for whenever God
Hmm.
says, this is it, that person in the line right there, go encourage them, tell them you're praying, you want to pray for them, or, you know, again, I love it. And I think the world tells us numbers, and that's never the impact. Jesus had 12 disciples that he poured
Yeah.
into. He
Yep.
had a small, and then he did speak to masses when he spoke, but really his ministry was to the people, to one-on-one relationships, making an impact.
Yes.
And it's not about the numbers, which is what the culture tells us. So we have to kind of
Mm.
go against that. But all right, I'm going to ask you two final questions. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you, where can we find these beautiful cards if people would like to get a set?
Absolutely. On my website, which is cherifletcher.com, and that's Cheri. So cherifletcher.com. At the top, you'll see the greeting card thing. And there's an evergreen code that's, if you type in welcome 10 in the promo code, you'll get 10% off, and that's evergreen. So just use that code, your listeners. And
I love
yeah,
that. Thank you.
you'll find even podcasts because I still have them up on that website as well.
I love that so much. And then last, you can see I'm an avid reader, and I think books are
Mhm.
such an important part in our growing as well as in
Mhm.
our healing. So, was there a book besides the Bible that really impacted you and helped
Yeah.
you? I'd love for you to share.
Well, like I said, it's been hard to read. I have finished two books
Yes.
cover to cover, but I have read parts and parts of many books. Um, and that my one that really was A Grace Disguised by Jerry
Yes.
Sittner. That one was so good. And then, if I can, like I mentioned, we've listened, my husband and I have listened to several podcasts that Dr. Lee Warren is on. But he was a doctor, well, he still is a doctor, but now he just works on speaking and podcasting. But um, Hope is the First Dose
Looks
is so
great. I haven't
good
read that.
on,
I'm so
yes.
excited.
And he lost his son as well and has a great story. And those two books are really, really good.
Yeah, those are great choices. Thank you. I haven't heard of
Mhm.
Dr. Lee Warren, so I'm excited. When I mentioned Kay Warren, that was Pastor Rick Warren's wife, the
Oh,
here in
okay,
Saddle. I went to
yes.
Saddleback
Thank
Church.
you.
So yeah, just to help you
Yeah.
clarify.
And
But yeah, I'm
his story is powerful too.
yeah, yeah. So I love though that you introduced me to a new author because that's why I ask these questions. I love,
Hmm.
people find other people and then we connect and so I really love these cards, you guys. I just want to say they're
Yeah.
going to be great conversation starters. If you know someone that's going through a hard thing, get a set of these cards, give them to them or use them to help foster great conversations with that loved one. And they really are just a gift because there's so many I have sitting here that I could read off that were my favorites. Like I pulled out again, there's so many great ones, but I pulled out like, look, 4 or 5 more. But I'm going to let you get them and check out what your
Yes.
favorites are. But Cheri, I just am so thankful for the way God connected us. And I thank you for sharing your heart today on the podcast. And I just appreciate you so much for being my guest this week.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you.